So, do you think the pandemic is only the beginning of things to come?
Dude, I seriously hope these grim thoughts of yours is just a lead in to today's video about the Vast Grimm, a sci-fi horror tabletop role-playing game.
I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
I'm Nerdarchy Dave. Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds.
Now let's get into this video before the worm gets us.
So as we alluded to, we are talking about a brand new sci-fi horror tabletop RPG game called The Vast Grimm. It is a OSR game and a bit of a Mork Borg hack. It's not a bit of it is a Mork Borg hack, which is kind of a really fun fantasy, really grim, dark, heavy metal meets
Cyberpunk.
OSR. Nah, not really. I mean, that one is very much fantasy.
Okay, but it is a great game. We've had a chance to actually get in there and be able to play test a little bit, and we are really looking forward to getting access to the full rule set and be able to play and run our own games. All right, so we've got access to some of the early release options here. The Earth that once was has been sliced through, gnawed at, chewed up, and spit out. All that remains are floating vestibules anchored to the fragmented carcass of an exploded planet. Is there fuel in their cores? Is it even possible to evade and escape is inevitable? I think not. Those who still remain are merely vessels within vessels, waiting to be fed upon. Let us not forget the space stations. Perhaps there is still some form of civilization left in these pockets? But when will the dormant awaken to become one of the grim? When will they be called to feast upon their souls? I pray that today is not the day where I am beckoned to become one of them.
Yeah, so that's like the opening excerpt from the Vast Grimm and kind of what it's about. And if Mork Borg is like fantasy RPG meets heavy metal, then Vast Grimm is sci-fi horror RPG meets punk, in its aesthetic, in the way the book's laid out. Brian Colin, he was really inspired by the Mork Borg game, and he's also a sculptor, makes all these crazy creatures, and he began sculpting this one called, I believe it's called a Warhound, and from that he was kind of inspired from the sculpture and his experience with Mork Borg, but he was also like, I was more heavily influenced by the punk scene growing up, and he wanted to take that and combine it with sci-fi horror and a tabletop RPG with the Mork Borg kind of aesthetic as well, all kind of mixed in together, and kind of hacked that rule set apart and came up with the Vast Grimm.
So as stated, we've had a chance to play. I've played in 2 games. Dave has played in 3, all of with Brian actually, being the DM, the GM in this case. It's been a lot of fun. It's entirely easy to run this, just totally off of random roll charts, which I thought has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, so, and also over on the Nerdarchy website, when this was on the Gamefound crowdfunding platform, Brian had wrote an article over there kind of about Gamefound and a little bit about Vast Grimm. So if you want more information about either of those things, you can check that out. And we're going to put links over to Infinite Black, which is the publisher for this game, as well as the original crowdfunding campaign as well. So you can kind of take a look at it. There'll be a bunch of links down in the description. You can probably find the article up on the card as well, up here above my head.
And you can be able to follow along on Gamefound so that when it does become available through their own version of Backer Kit, you'll be able to then get access to any and all the different cool rewards that were there for Gamefound. But hey, you're looking for another way to support Nerdarchy and allow us to keep making videos like these and those aforementioned articles on our website, why not check us out over on Patreon?
As a special reward, you'll receive 5e content for both players and DMs alike. We drop things every month over there, like drop-in encounters, magic items that we sometimes turn into print and play cards, maps from our very own games. We're creating subclasses, races, feats, spells, all kinds of things that I'm probably not even thinking of. There's even a chance to game with us. We have a free sample over there you can download and kind of get an idea of what some of the rewards are. It'll be up in the card over here. You can click, or you can even go down into the description and grab that link there as well. So go check that out.
So as Dave kind of alluded to, this is a an OSR D20 system, although it does use a lot of the standard D&D or polyhedral dice.
Well, that's what OSR is really like. That means it's going to be. There's a couple things that are going to go along with that. It's good. Generally they're class based. There's hit points. You kind of have stats. You're going to be rolling a D20, and because it's OSR, they tend to be kind of simplified. So these games are like super easy to get in and run. They also tend to be a little bit on the brutal side, and don't get too attached to your character kind of thing.
Well, my two, runs through the Vast Grimm have not shown the absolute brutal side. I have heard stories, and it's absolutely possible. So yeah, depending upon what you roll with, your legion might entirely fall.
Now, another thing is like, we mentioned OSR, and one of the things that generally goes along with OSR is lots and lots of charts. No different here with this game. Mork Borg does the same thing. This has been inspired by that. So like, you're very rarely you're going to find a page that there isn't a chart on it for you to roll something.
Now, I will say that, it takes a little bit of getting used to with some of these charts, because you have what some refer to as a D6-6 or a 2-die-6 roll chart. And, us old hats with, D&D rolls can roll percentile dice, and, you use, the one die for the one side and the other die for the other. Well, your D6-6 charts are kind of along the same line. So it'll be like 1 through 16 all the way up through, 66. But otherwise, you could just treat it like a percentile die rolled with D6s.
So the core game itself has 8 different character classes to choose from. We start off with the Mansheen and Soul Survivor. Mansheen is basically ye old cyborg, and Soul Survivor, I think it's like right in the name. You survived.
We've got the Lost Technomaniac, which is basically your space wizard. And we've got the Twisted Biochemist, which, that's kind of in the name. You're a scientist.
Yeah, we've got a Treacherous Merc, and we also have a Emo Bot. Twisted Merc, think soldier. Emo Bot, think robot or android.
The last two are more on the darker side. You've got the Devout, which is a worm worshipper, and the Harvester, which, you're out to harvest, these evil worms.
So also that one might be also like a scavenger collector type as well. Maybe a little bit of mad scientist thrown in there, kind of like our Twisted Biochemist. So yeah, like these classes and the game itself tends to be a little bit dark. The people you're playing aren't necessarily good people. Ted earlier mentioned something about legions, and your group is called a legion. Like that's your adventuring party, and that comes from the lore of the world back when the worms, right? And that's the thing. Like you're fighting against these worms, and what they are, these are parasites that infect people, and when you're infected, you become the Grimm. Way back when, there is 6 individuals. They found the mausoleum of and they opened it up, releasing the worms, becoming infected, and then it just kind of spread out from there. And now the worms, they get in you, they consume you, they grow until a point where there's nothing left of you, and they may just like consume your body, and then only the worm is left. And they can grow up to the size of planets. And they're just like wiping their way across the verse, wreaking havoc. Initially, we fought against them. Maybe we're still fighting against them, and that was the legions. But eventually, I believe like the organized resistance kind of broke down, and now it's just pockets of people trying to survive or find a way out of this verse into another one, in order to find someplace better and maybe start over.
The world is bad. It is actually on its way out. And that's actually incorporated too within the rule set. The torments have begun, and on a day-to-day basis, you have got the ability to have the world just be up and gone. and that's worked out by a set of dice that you use, and each day you roll whatever your torment die is. So it starts off at a d20, and like I said, when you roll a 1, it's then going to drop down to the next die, and no matter what you do, it never gets better. The die can't go back up.
Yeah. So it starts at a D20, it goes to a D12, D10, D6, D2, depending on like how bad you want things to be. And depending on your luck. So when you start with a D20, they still have much pain to inflict. D12, halfway around the verse. D10, there may be hope yet. D6, one more voyage. D2, the air is almost gone. So once you run out of these dice, the torment happens, and basically the worms overrun the verse, and everything is over. The game is over. The campaign is over.
This is an interesting mechanic that if you want to actually approach and have the campaign's got a time limit that's set up randomly. You want to give the players an option of, well, there is a place to go. There is some way out. Can you find it before the time clock gets you? This is an interesting thing that is literally in the hands of the dice and whoever happens to be rolling them. And when you get down to that final die, like it's sketchy. Like you're talking about a 50-50 versus, that first die, which is only a 5%.
And you roll every day.
And you roll every campaign day, not just every session. So it can be rough. There is no, let's take a 2-week siesta, because you could drop 3 dice in that time and you'd be like, oh God. So these are an element that I think can be incorporated and have a lot of fun with it. That's not something planned by the DM.
Also, another aspect would be like, if you wanted to keep the game going and keep the theme going, you could have your players make it out of the verse, right? Before the clock runs out. And if you wanted a way to reset it, that would be the reset where, okay, we're going to go back to the D20 now. But it's like, how long is this, this new place going to last before it also gets overrun by worms?
Yeah, because if you made it out, what's the chance that, a worm got through as well?
I mean, it just takes one of the Grimm.
Right.
Because whenever you encounter the Grimm, there is a 50-50 chance that you get a worm in you. Now, it doesn't mean you automatically become one of the Grimm, but you're on your way to becoming a Grimm.
Yeah, you can fight it off and possibly, survive, this issue. But it is not something that, you're looking forward to. After all, the status is called the Grimm. That's not a positive, happy-go-lucky word.
Yeah, I like to call them space zombies, but they're really not. Because they're intelligent. They work together. Like they can use anything that anyone else would be able to use, but like they're all connected by this idea that they're going to overrun the universe. And also, like, worth mentioning too is like one of the characters from the lore is Fatuma, or Fat Uma, if you would, who, that was the tomb and that was the book, and much of the lore is kind of based around that. And there are people that are all about the worms, and there are all people that are all about fighting the worms.
So in the game, like most other RPGs, you're going to have stats, and here, as opposed to like a sliding scale that, starts off and goes up, and then have a modifier attached to it, this game just uses the numbers. You can start off anywhere from a -3 to a +3, and it can go as high as a +6 if you happen to play long enough to make an advancement. But your stats can go up and down through these advancements. It's a bit tricky.
Yeah, you essentially, every time you complete an adventure, you make rolls and checks to see if things improve or get worse, because either one of them can happen. If you're rolling up your character, you roll 3d6, and then there's a chart that tells you what you get, and then you have 4 stats: agility, presence, strength, and toughness.
Presence is kind of going to be your super stat. It kind of is a combination of like intelligence and wisdom, maybe a little bit of charisma in there as well. Toughness is, literally how tough you are and how well you can fight off, the infection, fight off the worm if you happen to get access.
The next up is one of the things that you kind of start the game with is favors, and this is kind of like inspiration from D&D if you're used to it, or bennies from other systems that allow you to do a bunch of stuff. Generally, this is based on your character class. Most of them start with several, and there's several different things you can do with them.
So the very obvious thing, inspiration style mechanic is to get a reroll. You don't like what you got, you can just be like, all right, boom, I want to turn in a favor and use this to reroll. Another great one that I really enjoy is to get maximum damage. So you turn in that favor, and instead of rolling the die, whatever the max output you can put on there, boom, it's there.
You can also use a favor to reduce damage to you, or neutralize a crit, fumble or success against you. Super useful because you don't have a lot of hit points in this game.
I've seen a lot of characters randomly generated that have like, oh, I've got 1, I've got 2 hit points, and I'm like, God, that's like 1 hit. You're dead.
Well, maybe there's a bit more to that as well, which we'll get into.
And lastly, you can also use a favor to lower your difficulty rating. What number you're looking for on that D20 by 4. So suppose you're close, like you've got your target number of what you need. Rather than do a reroll, you can just be like, all right, I want to make this a little bit easier, and boom, you succeed.
And that's really super useful, especially if you're terrible at rolling dice.
Like some people over here.
Yeah, the game is very gear based as well. You're gonna have starting equipment and gear. You're gonna find gear and equipment throughout it. You're gonna have your armor, your ammo, and both of which are gonna be super important because it's a survival style game. So there's a limited number of ammo. Armor works different here. I believe there are either 3. I think there's 4 tiers starting at 0. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. And what happens is when you would normally take damage, you then roll your armor. And if you roll higher than the damage, you don't take any damage, or you reduce the damage by the number you rolled. So even like we said, like you may only have 1 or 2 hit points, but if you have really good armor, that 1 or 2 hit points might actually be enough for you.
It's really good. But as Dave says, this is a game where you track ammo, and at first I'm like, oh God, I really don't like it. But like getting into the character, it was something like, all right, I've got this item and I've got this item. Everything I can do requires expending something. I've got a laser knife, which expends charges when I stab something. Okay, I've only got so many charges I can use. Or I've got my semi-automatic pistol. I've only got so many bullets. Oh God, what do? I can recharge my dagger when I go back to the ship. I can't recharge my bullets. I gotta find more.
And that's a very good point, because ammo is going to work off of 2 different things, and one of them is actually you may have like bullets, like Ted said, and those things tend to be slightly better, but that kind of ammo is much harder to come by. Other things runs off of charges. It might be an electric sword, it might be a laser dagger, it might be your blaster, or your pulse rifle. And a battery has 24 charges, and you can recharge them, but I think they get back like 3 charges an hour or something like that. So you still need time to get them back in a power source to hook it up to, and if you got that, you're good to go. So that's kind of nice because you have to track in the moment, but it's not like you're completely out.
Right.
Unless you're talking about bullets, which are a lot harder to come by.
Which that's, totally what my, my character's primary weapon was. And I'm like, all right, we're in a bad situation. I'm just going to keep firing.
Yeah.
Because this was the Grimm. This was, things with worms right there in our faces. I'm gonna shoot and I'm gonna kill these things because I don't want to be infected.
I'm not gonna lie. When we've tied on initiative with other players, I will let the other player go first so they can expend their ammo and I can reserve mine.
It makes a lot of sense to to look at all of these factors, and it's a play style. And if you can get into the mindset of this is what the character has to do to survive, it's not really all that much extra work,
compared to some systems. Yeah, I do like the charge system because bullets are going to be kind of annoying, and it might even just be like, I'm going to use this until I'm out of bullets, and then this is pretty much junk because the chances of finding ammo aren't that great. But getting batteries and charging batteries is a lot easier.
And that can be a thing where, like, all right, you find more batteries, you can get them charged and then have them on your character that, okay, well, I just change out the battery and now I keep going.
Yeah.
That becomes another reward scenario, which, actually happened in our game that we played. I'm like, oh, we got a stash here. This is amazing.
Yeah, well, kind of. It was funny because we found 12 batteries. 11 of them had one charge. I don't know if there's anything you can do with one charge.
Nothing that I've seen.
One of them had 3 charges, which meant like you could use it for one shot.
And to make things easier, it's not like, oh, well, you've got AA's and triple A's and C's and D's. Like, battery is a universal thing. So whether it's the laser knife, the pulse pistol, the pulse rifle, the battery fits them all and can function. So like, it's
clearly Steve Jobs has been in a long time in this multiverse, and no one came up with the idea of very specific charger types so that you can only use their brand.
So this is definitely a cooler thing. They've streamlined the process so that it's a lot easier and takes the frustration of tracking to be a lot easier.
Also, one of the other things we have is neuromancy, right? And we kind of mentioned like the Space Wizard. Well, neuromancy powers what would be equivalent to magic items in this game, tributes. And at the beginning of the day, you start with neuromancy points, and you roll a d4 plus your presence or minus your presence, depending on what your stat is. And then you can use those tributes, and they work in different ways. And like some of them are considered locked and some of them are considered unlocked. There's ones that'll just activate as soon as you touch it, whether you want to or not. I believe there's some classes that just can't even use them. So like depending, there's different rules for that. And like I said, we're very new to the game. We're still learning it, but just know that that's a thing.
So in this game, this is a DM doesn't really deal with the dice unless they're rolling on the charts. The players are actually going to roll all the dice for the monsters attacking them. You roll to dodge or avoid the issue, and you roll to attack to see if you are successful. So when it comes to combat, the DM just describes what's going on, and the players respond by rolling the dice to see what happens.
Yeah, the players are going to roll for their attacks, and they're going to roll for their defense. The standard DC in the game is basically set at a 12. There are things that will bring it up and up or bring it down. And I believe the range is like from 6 to 18, essentially.
It's definitely a lot of fun, and then those are of course modified by whatever particular stat you're rolling against. So it makes it a lot easier to hit those target numbers. And of course, you've always got to be able to turn in those favors to lower that by 4. Can make it a lot easier.
And then initiative is just a 50-50. You roll a d6. On a high roll, the players go. On a low roll, the bad guys go. And then the players will then roll a d6 individually to determine the order that they go in. Ties are broken by your agility.
So the last thing is, like every other D20 system that I've played, there are going to be crits in the game.
Yeah, so crit success generally on like a damage, you're going to double your damage. On a crit 1, you fumble, there's bad things that happen. Matter of fact, in the book itself, it gives you a list of like, oh, here are some benefits for critting, or here are some penalties for critting, depending on what you get. So, I don't think an OSR game would be complete without a crit success and fumble system. That is Vast Grimm in a nutshell. We're going to put links down in the description for you to go check it out when it drops. Get a hold of it. It's a lot of fun. It's super easy to learn. We had great experiences with playing it, and there is even going to be an adventure that we have written for one of the stretch goals for the crowdfunding campaign. If you've seen it, if you've played it, if your thoughts have thoughts about it, put them down in the comments below and share them with the Nerdarchy community.
While you're down there, don't forget to do all those fun things like, share, subscribe, even go ahead and click on that notification bell before the worms get you.
Quick reminder, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we drop new videos here on the channel. But hey, you can't wait till then. No worries, we got you covered up here. Check out this card. Quest RPG. Nerdarchy plays other RPGs.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.